Now, Sir Thomas, can you tell me if there's any particular reason why you've produced your Life of Delius at this particular moment?
I have contemplated it for a long time. But you see, as I think I have already indicated in the preface to this book, there were reasons for not producing it before. Very soon after Delius had appeared in this country and had become famous in Germany, there also began a spate of so-called literary works about him, monographs, and, mostly in German as well. And the climax of that effort occurred in about 1923 when Philip Heseltine, better known perhaps as Peter Warlock, wrote a full-sized book. Well, nearly everything in the book, so far as the life of Delius was concerned, his behavior through a portion of his career, was inaccurate. And there were very large hiatuses or voids in the story. Then later on we had a book by his sister, devoted mostly to his childhood, what sort of jam he liked for tea, and what kind of rod he was beaten with by his parents when he was a naughty boy, and what he liked in the way of public performances, such as circuses, you know. But I didn't think it really conveyed much information to the public at large about the man Delius. About the later part of his life, it was sketchy, and really there were whole voids, gaps, enormous gaps.
Yes.
There has never been a simple story of his life told accurately and covering every decade of it.
Yes.
Competently done. And it took me a long time to find out the truth.
You were a close personal friend of Delius.
I wouldn't say I was a close friend, because actual friendship, as understood by most people, denotes a certain common interest in most things. Delius and I, apart from his music, had no common interest in anything. We were at opposite ends of the pole of thought and feeling about life generally. I admired him very much as a man, because I recognized in him an extraordinary individual, built in a mold that was easy to understand or appreciate, because nothing ever altered that mold, tampered with it, deflected him from a purpose. He was like a rock, and that was very refreshing to come across. But he held a great many views on many subjects that failed to commend themselves to me. When you got him alone, he was a wonderful companion, because he shed a lot of his personality and condescended to be very, very human and very kindly and thoughtful, and he had a great sense of humor.
In his early days, when he wasn't a great success as a composer, he was a genial man, and after his success and after his marriage, he seemed to change.
No, it wasn't due to his success, and it wasn't due to his marriage. His marriage was a very beneficial interest in his life. I have related that during the first 38 or 9 years of his life, Delius, except the brief period he was in Virginia, when he taught the violin and the piano and instructed all the young ladies of the town in the mysteries of music making and possibly other things besides, with the exception of that brief period, he never made any money. He was kept by his father and his uncle. Then his father's business began to decline, and the uncle thought he'd done enough for him, and he was left stranded on his own. And that had an extraordinary effect upon him, and it was the turning point in his life. And gradually this extraordinary outward geniality and inward joviality began to disappear slowly. But it took some time. But by about 1911 or so, it almost entirely disappeared. And he was quite, shall we say, an austere character. What developed in Delius was this, that he had bigger conceptions of music in the form of shapes and molds, expanding conceptions, which he couldn't realize until he was about 38 or 39. And then he had a revelation. When he received this bequest from his uncle, Theodore, almost the first thing he did was to give a concert in London. Now, with one exception, no large work of his had ever been heard by him. His music for him was music on paper. This concert, as I said, was a revelation. He heard his own music, and it acted upon him in a very extraordinary way. He went back to France, he went into a period of 2 years self-communion, and he emerged with a much wider and grander notion of what he could do with his talent or genius.
At what point, Sir Thomas, would you say that he became popular as a composer in England?
Nothing had been played in England since his own concert in 1899 and 1907. Although the press had been laudatory at his one-man concert in 1899, and the public seemed interested, no one anywhere played a single note of his music for 8 years in the land of his birth. However, he turned up again, because Henry Wood had included in Promenade concert series his piano concerto, which of course is a transition work, played by an excellent pianist, Santo. And that had a really very great success. Difficult for people, having heard all the later Delius, to appreciate how a wide was such a success. But there is no doubt, as I read the letters of men like Vaughan Williams and Bax and Elgar and Bantock, say this is marvelous, marvelous something. And that was followed up then by a performance of Appalachia, and that was really a red letter day in British music, because we'd never heard anything like that before. Nobody else had heard it anywhere. The sound of the orchestra, the idea of variations in this form was quite new. Chorus treated in the way it did, singing without words and things, that sort of thing.
Did Delius ever conduct his own music?
Well, I have seen in my time good conductors, not so good, competent conductors, indifferent conductors, but I have never come across such an abysmal depth of ineptitude in the way of conducting as revealed by poor old Frederick. It was quite a common thing for him to beat 5 in the bar when it was 4. He beat it 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, which turned into 5. Well, of course, the orchestra became almost distracted. The public became restless. Well, what's going on? What's going on? Something always went on when Delius conducted the work of his own. But there was a time when he used to practice many hours a day, for weeks at a time, in front of a mirror, endeavoring to understand this mysterious craft.
But to no purpose?
No purpose at all.
You discussed his scores with Delius?
Oh, never.
Oh, never?
Oh, good God, no. Of course I wouldn't. He couldn't tell me anything about them. I occasionally said, now, Frederick, about this piece, I'd like to ask you what you'd like done here. And he said, well, I can't remember now, but do anything you like with it. That's charming. And I have applied that principle to the work of every other composer.
So it's not true to say that you, from your discussions with Delius, have a special understanding of these works which nobody else has?
No, the only thing that happened was when I played them, and he heard them in the concert room or on the radio, he said, that's the way I want it. Don't change that. That's grand.
And it's on the basis of this that you're preparing your special edition of Delius?
Yes. What?
And one hopes that eventually other conductors will use your edition and perhaps begin to understand how to perform.
Who hopes?
We do, who listen to music.
Optimist.
Well, now, just one last question. What do you think would have happened to this music if you hadn't existed as a conductor?
I can't tell you. I can't even begin to think what would have happened. But I know one thing, that the vast majority of the performances of the works would have been totally unrepresentative of Frederick Delius. And that possibly would have meant his disappearance from the scene 20 or 30 years ago. That I do know. What I have done, really, is to uphold the banner of his integrity as a great originator, pathfinder, and a man of genius in respect of the ability to transmit into music human emotions of all kinds, an extraordinary kinship with nature, only not equal but very closely approached by Berlioz, but nobody else has done it, and also an extraordinary sense of beauty of sound, which has not been surpassed by any composer dead or alive in the world.